Welcome to Washington Policy on the Go. My name is David Bose. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director for Washington Policy Center. And during the legislative session, we come to you every week with a Washington Policy on the Go, where we interview our center directors about their latest research, what's been happening in Olympia, and on rare occasions, we have special guests as well. But today, we have two of our researchers. One, Elizabeth Hovde. She is the director of our Centers for Healthcare and our Center for Worker Rights. And then we'll speak with our Center for Education Director Liv Finne. There will be times during over the next few weeks where instead of starting at noon sharp, we'll start around 12:05, which is the case today, or between 12:05 and 12:10. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that. Zoom is a little bit techy on that, a little bit prickly on that issue. Can't start a Zoom meeting except at the half-hour intervals, at least from what I tried this morning. So I wanted to alert you to that, and that's just due to other schedules there. So that's what we have. Now we will turn to Elizabeth Hovde, who has two publications out today. One of them is a new publication examining a repeal of the new payroll tax for long-term care. Elizabeth, you want to describe the bill and what it would do and the impact?
Sure. So many of you might know that a long-term care related payroll tax is coming to you in July. It's for a program that was created by a law called Washington Cares. There's ads all over the radio right now about it that I hear. And basically it would tax you 58 cents per $100 for every for your wages. And there's a repeal bill that would take this law away. This law is not a good one, in my opinion, because of the return on investment not being there, taking low-income wages from workers with low incomes and giving it to people with higher incomes, et cetera, et cetera. So last year, a few repeal bills were filed to get rid of this law. Now that lawmakers know it's solvency troubles that are possible and how much people don't like this payroll tax or the program that it creates. And those bills were ignored. This year, there's another one that's being ignored. It's House Bill 1011. And I'm hopeful that it will get a hearing so these issues can be discussed. I don't know how many legislators would continue to support this legislation that was passed in 2019, now that we know so much about its many shortcomings.
Is there anything new to report about the long-term care bill itself in terms of the number of people ultimately that opted out? Any concern in the legislature about the sheer volume of people opting out, that kind of thing?
No, I think they're happy that the window has ended, that you can opt out if you have a private long-term care insurance plan. There really wasn't an opt-out for this program. You are in it. And there was a technical glitch in the way they wrote the law. They were trying to grandfather in people who had long-term care insurance policies. They left it open-ended. So then the next year they came and shut down that window, and you had to purchase your private plan by November 1st of 2021 for it to get you an exemption. So a lot of people went after that. The industry actually shut down because they were overwhelmed by the state's intervention in their market. And a lot more people wanted private long-term care insurance, but I don't see it opening back up. I do see that it's possible that they will require recertification. I'm sort of waiting for the legislature to address the recommendations that were made in a long-term services and supports commission. And one of those things is the recertification to prove that you still carry this private long-term care insurance that you had when you were exempted from the tax and the long-term care program. So there isn't anything new for allowing more people to opt out that was related to the past in the way that it did. The legislature last year, because they saw so many problems with how unfair this was to people who live out of state but work in Washington state, or people on non-immigrant visas who are here, or disabled veterans who don't need this program because it duplicates something they already have. They let these people, they gave them the allowance to apply for a voluntary exemption. They're calling it voluntary. They won't automatically be exempted. They have to go through the process, which I hear is very easy, but they do have to go there. They have to apply to opt out. And so, you know, the solvency predictions are kind of up and down. 2 years ago, it was released by Milliman that they were going to have huge solvency problems, and the state actuary had estimated $15 billion shortfall before it even began, because voters turned down an amendment about how you can invest those funds. Now that same firm is saying that, you know, given investments changes, given the changes in the bill was delayed. So because of the delay, it ended up actually helping the fund a little bit stay solvent. So solvency is still up in the air. I would remind people, though, that even if it is solvent, which I don't think it is necessarily, payroll taxes go up. So this could increase to more of your paycheck over time.
So has the bill to repeal, does it have any hearings scheduled, or what's your assessment right now of the reaction so far to the repeal? And has it gained kind of, or is there a bipartisan, is there a bipartisan embrace of it?
I don't see that, no. In fact, last week I was at the Capitol and asking around about any chances for a hearing that we see, and I was told don't count on it. The Speaker of the House is the one who brought the original long-term care law into being. She sponsored the bill and it was passed, and it seems like this is largely on party lines that there's either support for the notion or there is not, and I don't think they want to consider repealing it. The bill is there, however, and it's waiting, and it can be taken by the legislature if they will consider it. There is also a bill in the Senate that is hopeful for a delay, another year delay of this program. And I think what that could do is probably beef up solvency again in the way that they saw it do last time, or predicted it will do last time. You know, if your income is higher over the number of years that this thing is in place, which is forever after it starts, if the incomes are higher and your benefit is still the low payout, the lifetime benefit is $36,500 for people who health qualify and live in the state, etc. But if your income is getting higher and that is still low, inadequate as it is, that will improve solvency. So I have a feeling that might be tempting to some lawmakers to pass that delay bill. We'll see. And it would delay not only the tax coming out of your checks, but your ability to apply for this too. So where you are on the age spectrum is really instrumental in whether that's a good thing or not.
Well, the reason I asked about, for those who are watching, the reason I asked about the bipartisan nature is, if it's just one side, well, if it's on the Republican side, there's just not enough movement there's not enough numbers to do anything. So it has to have some Democrat support at least. Democrats as a majority, they can do, whatever they wish, but it would have to have that bipartisan support if the majority of the support were coming from the right.
That's a great point. There's 31 co-sponsors to this bill repealing the long-term care law. I think there is one Democrat among those 31. I'd have to check again, don't quote me. But yeah, it is widely liked by Republicans. It is widely being not thought of as a solution by the Democrats, who seem to be sticking together on this bill.
Want to remind people, you can read the legislative analysis, the legislative memo written by Elizabeth on our page at washingtonpolicy.org. It's in our latest publications. Let's turn to your other study that was released yesterday, and that is your policy brief on the nurse licensure compact. First, let's start with what is it and why is it important for Washington?
Nurse licensure is important because we have a shortage of nurses. There aren't enough nurses here. I think the Washington State Hospital Association estimates about 6,100 nurses are needed to help keep hospitals from not filling. For a long time, we had Department of Health messages coming out about how our hospitals were full. There was no room for them. There was an implication for a while that it was a COVID-19 related situation. And when you dug down into the numbers and the reality, we're short of staff. There were beds available in many of those cases. But a shortage of staff means you're short on beds, right? If you can't man the bed, it goes away. So some hospitals are even considering shutting down departments, which would be a loss to the whole department of nurses, right? The Nurse Licensure Compact would allow us to bring in nurses from other states who have qualified nursing licensure in other states to get to work providing for patients here without a licensing wait. Right now, there's a licensing wait that is a barrier to care. And also, Washington is a very attractive place to nurse. We're constantly voted on for being one of the friendliest places with the highest wages for nurses. So people do want to come here, I believe, and the Nurse Licensure Compact would allow people to come here seamlessly, easily, and get to work caring for patients. And COVID-19 really brought this to the forefront for the whole nation. A lot of states have been against nurse licensure compacts to leave the licensing in the care of an individual state. And when we saw hot spots rolling around the nation, people realized this is silly. We have driver's license that take us across state lines. You don't have to stop and register for a new license at every state line. But for nursing, you do. You can't go help. And so there was an emergency order that lifted that for a while, but that's gone now. That has ended. So the Nurse Licensing Compact is a compact that 37 states belong to right now. And if we join it, we'd be the 38th. And it would allow us to bring in nurses when we need it. You're not bringing nurses when you don't need it, and it would allow people to relocate here easily and military spouses to get to work right away if they're nurses, etc.
Well, it's shocking to think of how many hospitals are in trouble right now. I mean, we've talked to a couple of people that are on boards of hospitals, and it's a really serious problem that I think is under talked about right now in Washington and under examined. It's one of those invisible problems. It's not a problem until you need it, and
Right.
then it can become a very big problem. How would the state join the Nurse Licensure Compact?
Well, they need legislation to be allowed to do it, basically, and then they would do it. So that luckily, and unbeknownst to me, when I wrote this thing in the fall, they weren't considering it at all last year. It was just kind of being ignored. The discussions about it were not existent. This year, it looks like there are two bills that would allow us to join the Nurse Licensure Compact. One is being heard on Friday. It's House Bill 1417. I haven't read the bills in full yet, but there is a House bill and a Senate bill that would allow us to join the Nurse Licensure Compact. So that's exciting. I'll be watching those and adding my research on this policy issue to the debate and to lawmakers.
Who opposes accepting career licenses from out of state? Not just nursing, but where's the opposite? Where does the opposition come from? I guess is the question.
Traditionally, it's been the nurses union in our state who has opposed it. And, it's a tough one. A lot of nurses show up to speak out against it, but they've also been told that it threatens their jobs. It doesn't. We have a shortage. They also oppose the compact because in the past, they opposed the compact because they felt that they would lose the disciplinary action that is available to them now under licensure in Washington state. The Nurse Licensure Compact people have heard this complaint across different states, and they've corrected some things that go along with background checks and disciplinary action. And even if you're a member of the compact, you can be disciplined by the state you're practicing in. So it retains disciplinary measures and is able to let states hold all their nurses to high standards, no matter what state they're from. but that's usually the opposition. And I think over the years, the Nurse Licensure Compact has voided the arguments that come out against it.
Now, you've been very careful to say this is not something that cures the nursing shortage. This is something that alleviates that. Why do you want to make that clear?
I want to make that clear because there are downsides to what they call travel nurses, right? They're expensive. And so if you have a nurse licensure, a nurse getting a license just to hop states and make more money and not stay anywhere, that's not what we want. We want to grow nurses here. We want to have nurses living here, and we want to pay them appropriately. But the nurse, and even if you have this, you're not, there are just so many other things you need to do. You need to create an upline of nurses. I'm interested in programs that can allow people in training to alleviate some of the burden on nurses and be working with them as part of their professional pursuit. So there are plenty of things we can do. And this is just one of those things that if we are in a tight spot and a hospital needs it, or there is a hot spot with COVID or any other thing that comes our way, you can have a solution. You can have a tool in the toolbox to fight it.
All right,
Sorry.
people can read the full publication on joining the Nurse Licensure Compact and share that with others. And we encourage you to do so. I mean, this is our information is only as good as how many people we can spread this information to. And that's really important to us, as and all of us here at Washington Policy Center to share that stuff as much as possible. I've posted a link here that everyone should be able to see where you can get directly to that publication. And,
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead and finish that, and then I want to add something.
No, go ahead.
I first of all, I'm sorry, I know too much about these two issues and I talk too much, but I wanted to go back to the legislative memo and the solutions for long-term care that are sitting and waiting. There is also another bill I did not mention yet in this broadcast, or that just came out, so it's not in the legislative reviews I've written either. But there is also a bill right now in the Senate that would prohibit the state from requiring recertification. So a lot of people heard about the long-term care law because of what we said, and because we were letting people know, hey, this long-term care payroll tax is coming. There's only one way to get out. And right now you can buy a long-term care policy, blah, blah, blah. And I feel incumbent to say that, since they're worried about solvency and they're worried about people's buy-in to this program, they've considered a recertification of that exemption. And this Senate bill would prohibit them from requiring a recertification. So we'll see where that goes. It's fine legislation. It's nothing to get excited about. What there is to get excited about is possible repeal of this law, which I think is not patient-centered and doesn't work for all workers, including low-income ones.
Well,
Sorry.
if they want recertification, I would appreciate it if they'd reopen the window for opting out. That would be nice too. So real quick, one more question for you. How are the hospitals responding to the large salaries they need to pay the traveling nurses?
Oh, it's awful, right? For them. They're paying them, but it's shutting down services, all the bills, all the high bills right now. The hospitals say are affecting, supply, it's affecting labor costs. Labor costs are the huge problem for hospitals right now. Many are threatening closure. And I don't think it's a fake threat. I think it's real, especially rural hospitals. And this is a problem, if we don't have rural hospitals, there's no alternative for people to go but hours away. So anything we can do to help the labor pool for hospitals, I think is important.
Yeah, I mean, it's a de facto rationing of care. You're just closing stuff down and making people wait long enough because they can't function.
Right.
So it's a scary situation that I think a lot of people are unaware of.
And
Elizabeth, yeah, go ahead.
Washington, like I said, Washington is an attractive place to be a nurse. So I think the nurse licensure, even though you have this high cost of travel nurse problem that could come with it a little bit, getting nurses here, Washington's a great place to be and be a nurse, and we know how great it is to live too. So I think it's important from that angle to see it as an opportunity, not just a distraction on pay.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll have you back again. We have one last question real quickly before I let you go that he just popped in, Hector, at the last second. Regarding healthcare, are there any bills or discussions in the legislature about state certificate of need rules?
I have not seen those yet. Of course, we'd be interested in them. I have not seen any bills related to that.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Now I'd like to bring in our Center for Education Director, Liv Finne. And for Liv, her publications are actually being published tomorrow. So this is a special kind of sneak peek into what's coming out tomorrow for you, those of you who are subscribers to Washington Policy on the Go and come here, and you'll have the special benefit. You know, Liv, why don't we start with the Parent Bill of Rights? This is your examination of Senate Bill 5024. What does this deal with? What does this give parents the right to? You're muted, so we got to unmute you first.
Oh dear. Sorry.
We
Here we go. Well,
happens
yes,
to the best of us.
Oh man, I'm trying to keep everything going here. So this Parents Bill of Rights bill is Senate Bill 5024 that will be heard in committee tomorrow at 1:30 before the Senate Education Committee. And it's sponsored by Senator Dozier and a number of Republican senators. And the reason for this bill is that you'll all recall that in May of 2021, Governor Inslee signed legislation requiring that the divisive critical race theory content be introduced in all the K-12 public schools in Washington state. Yet we've heard officials deny that CRT is being taught in the Washington public schools. And so this bill is a response to parents seeking to protect their children from the harmful and divisive content of critical race theory. And it would require school districts to post curricula, textbooks, and other instructional materials online so parents can see what their districts are teaching their kids. And it would require school boards to allow parents to participate in public meetings. It would require that these public meetings be recorded and posted online, and other things along that line of more transparency so parents know what's actually going on in the school so they can participate in the system that we have of local control of our school districts.
So is this a new right, Liv, or do parents already have the right to that? Or is this just like an amplification of a current right or a modernizing of it?
It's a great question, because what is a right? It's a expression. The parents have the fundamental right to direct the education of their children. That's been established by our moral law that governs us, but also the constitutional law that we follow. There's a long tradition of statements in the U.S. Supreme Court saying that parents have this fundamental right. So what's happening here is an attempt to clarify some of those rights. Now, the question that we think this is a good bill. We think that describing that some basic principles here, that parents have the right to know what the teachers are teaching their kids. Of course, everybody agrees with that. But there's been, as people following education have seen, that there's been a radical element that's taken over taken over the content that's being presented to students, and families aren't happy with it. And so this is a response to that. Everyone has seen the school board meetings where parents are protesting what's being taught their children, and school board directors either responding or not responding to the wishes of parents to know what's going on, and not just know what's going on, but change what's going on. So we think this bill is a good bill. It's a step in the right direction. However, I myself do Freedom of Information Act requests all the time from districts, and often I don't get what I'm after, because it's actually more of a paper right than an enforceable right. So
that's what I was going to ask you, is there teeth to the right? Because there's lots of things that you have that are written. I've seen this in in family law situations. I've seen this in school district situations and public records requests with other agencies. Well, we see it with Seattle right now too,
Oh,
right?
man.
I mean, they were just atrociously destroying public information. So what is the, what are the teeth? And if the teeth isn't to the individual too, it's in a, and if it's only the bureaucracy that has to pay, ultimately that's the taxpayers paying other taxpayers, then you have an incentive, right, to do whatever makes your life easier as a bureaucrat.
Well, is it an empty right that the parents are being given? That's what you're getting at. Is it just a right on paper that can't be enforced? I mean, so this happens all the time in trying to get information on these districts. They say, no, you haven't identified such and such a thing, and therefore we're not going to. Calling me, excuse me. I just took care of that. Anyway, so that's especially in a monopoly system that's run by unions, the public school system. Parents don't have enough power, and so the way to make these bureaucracies respect parents is to increase the choice that parents have. So families that are not satisfied with the being informed or not informed by their district about what their kids are being taught have some actual power to leave the district if they don't like what's happening in the schools. And so that's why we support, these bills that are coming forward across the nation now to give parents actual control of some of their education funding so they can homeschool, just leave the public school system entirely, homeschool their kids, pay private school tuition. We think that's the way to make these districts respect the wishes of parents and listen to them.
It'll also be interesting to see the opposition. You know what I mean? Like, who is there to say, no, parents, we don't want you to see what we're teaching your kids? Because there's a mentality that goes along with that, which is that, the kids don't belong primarily to the parents. The kids belong primarily to, the system or bureaucrats within a system, which I think is a distorted, and I'm sure you agree, a distorted power view. And so it'll be interesting to see the resistance to a pretty straightforward and simple declaration bill that parents have the right to see what their kids are being taught, right? I mean, that's ultimately what it comes, bare bones simplified. Parents should have the right, and it should be forthcoming. It should be made easy for them so they don't have to take a day off work to go down to the district to find out what it is, right?
And if they don't like what they see, they should have the right to have the schools pull this stuff back, because it's not correct that these, like you're saying, these bureaucrats are, so I'm sorry about that. Some of these officials seem to think that it's coming out of the schools of education. We've talked about this before, that some of these young teachers and some of the older teachers think that their main duty to the public is to implement this social justice reform, vis-a-vis critical race theory. And this is not acceptable to most rational people in the middle in Washington, in the country. And so that's why there's such a fight now before school boards. This is a controversial subject. And the lawmakers are responding to the angry parents that are saying, what are you going to do about this to help me? My child is being taught that they're bad because of the color of their skin. My child is being sexualized in early grades. This is not okay with us. And so this is what the fight's about. And what you're seeing is a discussion about how do you fix this? And I mean, what's going on is amazing in other states of this nation. I just saw yesterday, Utah passed a universal school choice bill now. That's the third in the country just in the last couple of years. West Virginia, Arizona, and Utah are now offering families a portion of their dollars to do what they need to do to educate their children in private school or in homeschool. So that's the caution that I would give on this bill. There has to be some kind of enforcement mechanism. I mean, saying they have a right, maybe they'll get, access to this information, maybe they won't, so it's a step in the right direction. And it actually does what you say very well. It identifies whose children they are. Just the fact that we're discussing whose children are they? Are they the parents who, have them and take care of them and raise them up and worry about them every day, every single day, and then worry about them after they graduate from high school or not, or whatever? Parents, these children are the children of parents, not of the state. The state does not have the right to decide how to educate the children. So that's what this fight's really about, and we're going to see it play out over the next 10 years. It's just amazing that the schools are making a big mistake and not respecting parents' rights. And it'll be very interesting to hear who opposes this bill in committee tomorrow.
Right, and I should point out, we did put the bill number for the Parent Bill of Rights there for people who want to research that more, and go. You can go online tomorrow. Liv's legislative memo will be published. But your comments actually bring me to the second publication that you wrote that'll be released tomorrow, and that is I think Senate Bill 5237, where there is there's an enforcement provision where if the district is doing the wrong, if the district has chosen the wrong curricula as defined by the state, then the superintendent can come in and decide for them what curricula are going to be taught in the school. But it's framed like it's a wrong or illegal kind of curricula, but it strikes me that it might be broader than that. Describe for us what this bill would do and how it kind of strips away it puts local control subservient to the control of the superintendent of public instruction.
Yes, thank you. That's a good description. It's a very difficult bill because it's so vaguely written and would fail, I think, under an attack, a constitutional attack for vagueness. However, what it does is it creates a complaint procedure where someone who doesn't like what's being taught in Kennewick, let's say, can bring a complaint to OSPI and say, this district is not teaching CRT. And
just to be clear, you're saying somebody in Seattle, say, or,
yes.
Tacoma could make a complaint about what's happening
Yes.
in Kennewick or,
yes.
or Spokane. Sure.
Yes, exactly. And then bring this complaint before OSPI, who would then have the power to withhold 20% of the district's funding because the state, OSPI does not like what Kennewick is doing. So it's a direct attack on our system of local control over the selection of textbooks and instructional materials. And this is what this is getting at. Our state has a couple statutes. I have the statutes identified in this legislative memo that clearly provide that it is local school districts, school boards elected with the support of the community members who select the individual textbook materials and instructional materials used to teach kids in that district to reflect the community's values. And so this is a direct attack on our democratic system of local control, where we elect school board directors to represent our values in the schools. And it's just I was concerned about this during COVID because the state superintendent of public instruction used his power to enforce masks on students. You remember threatening to withhold funding from districts that were trying to get rid of the mask mandate when they had no danger of COVID in their district. So he's now going forward with trying to assert his power, and we'll see if the state seizes more control over the selection of textbooks.
Yeah, I was wondering. I did not. I was unaware that he had the power of the purse there. I did not think.
Well, he has it under, if it's according to, there's a administrative rule that lets him, if there's a law, and that he used allow if some district is violating some law, and of course he used the emergency powers law that the governor extended for how many days, 900 days, to threaten districts with the loss of money. And so now we're seeing him applying this idea to textbook selection. And what they're doing is they're defining, it's really pernicious and deceitful, because what they're doing is defining what is sexual harassment and bullying to include these gender categories. I think it's a hidden speech code that they're trying to force districts to use a certain speech code with respect to different people. And so, but of course it's not really spelled out in the bill, but it certainly could be interpreted that way to impose these radical ideas on school districts that don't like them.
Yeah, I mean, it's established that you don't have to use, somebody else can't control the pronouns that you want to use, right?
Yes.
There are people who hold that pronouns have an objective meaning, and that the latest subjective use of them is wrongheaded, and either those who are offended by that want to force them into a certain category, and it's their First Amendment right to disagree with that. Some people are angry about that, and
Yes, yes.
but that's the whole point of free speech there. So
Well,
I can see what's happening.
Exactly. It's free speech violations and civil rights violations, constitutional rights violations. This is really amazing to see happen.
So does this bill define what how they would judge a curricula as, as so bad that the superintendent gets to step in and take over essentially the choice for that district?
No, it's not defined, but you see this at the same time, the state, the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction is writing learning standards to incorporate critical race theory and radical sex gender concepts in the learning standards in different subjects. And that agency is identifying textbooks that it recommends for adoption by local school districts. And so I can see this bill being used. You can see a complaint being brought against the Kennewick School District from somebody in Seattle saying the Kennewick School District is not using the recommended textbooks that OSPI likes, and OSPI will say, yep, we agree, and we're going to withhold your funding if you don't adopt the textbooks that we want you to adopt. I mean, this is the United States of America. I really did think we believed in different points of view on things and different ideas and approaches. That's what education is all about. Inquiry and knowledge is not prescriptive according to some state bureaucracy. So the freedom to choose the textbooks that teach history is really important to who we are as a nation and who the children grow up identifying as. So because and what I just really can't stand is the falsehoods of rewriting of history. The 1619 project that teaches that our country was based, falsely teaches, promoted by the New York Times, falsely teaches that our nation was founded to promote the institution of slavery. That is a lie. And now that is being taught our children in the schools. And so for Kennewick to say we're not going to teach that lie to our children is completely right and honorable and should be respected and not attacked. But that's what's happening in this particular bill. And in another one, there was another bill, I think it was House Bill 1239, which I didn't write a ledge memo on that, but it's the same idea. They're going to create an educator code of educator conduct, which is again the same effort to force teachers to submit to this new ideology.
Well, and there's, for those who are saying that there's no, they have to watch out for the morals of the teachers. So there's a moral clause in teaching already in the rules.
Yes.
So I don't know what morals they're applying to it these days, because everybody seems to, have their own set there. But
yeah,
but
that's a great point. There is a professional code of conduct for teachers already. They're not supposed to abuse children, and yet they're abusing children in some districts. I heard some testimony yesterday of a recent graduate at Seattle Public Schools saying that he hated to go to school because he was a white boy and he was always being attacked by his teachers for the actions of white people 200 years ago. I mean, it's outrageous. It's incredible the teachers would do this. They're supposed to care about children, but now they're being bullied into this by the state, by this whole thing. It's just so outrageous and distasteful, and it's going to lead to so much division and anger. And here we are supposed to be unifying in a public school system and respecting one another for our differences in viewpoints instead of forcing one set of viewpoint on everyone.
Now, I want to remind folks out there that the two publications we talked about with Elizabeth Hovde, our Center for Healthcare Director, those are available at washingtonpolicy.org today. They were published yesterday. For Liv's, both of these publications for legislative memos on both of these bills, the numbers of which are in your chat box there, they will be published tomorrow. And I would encourage you to take them, read them, share some of the key findings with your friends and neighbors and other people concerned about education in the state. We try to provide as much information to people as possible and keep them up to date on what's happening in Olympia. A couple of quick questions for you, Liv. Not a little off topic, but they're still in your wheelhouse, I think. One is I read a headline today that many teachers in Indiana are leaving their teachers union. Is there anything helpful in this scenario for us?
Well, absolutely, because if the teachers are leaving their union, then the union itself is not collecting dues from the teachers' paychecks, and that will weaken the capacity and the power of the union to oppose giving parents some real options in education. Like the bill that is going to be heard this Thursday, there's a bill that had got a hearing here in Washington State. It's House Bill 1615. It's going to be heard in the House Education Committee. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I'll be testifying in support of that bill because it would create an education savings account program to help students who need support. And they've including low-income students, students assigned by zip code to their to a failing school, and students who have special needs. And these families who would get an education savings account with nearly $11,000 per student to use on private school or homeschooling if you're a low income or or assigned to a failing school. If you're in that category, if you're a family with a special needs kid, you will get another additional $10,000, nearly $21,000 to use in your education savings account. And eligible expenses are all these expenses related to educating your child yourself, including private school options. And so that is so momentous. The fact that there's a hearing on this bill is big, and it's because of the pressure from parents that are demanding options and choices, and the movement across the nation where this is spreading like wildfire. It's very exciting to see.
Yeah, I don't want to give it away because we got two important publications. Your legislative memo is coming out tomorrow, but we have another couple from you next week. Education is just, there's a lot going on right now, so it's just it's tough to keep up. But one of them we're presenting like a fact check, which will be a lot of fun. So next week, if you see Liv back here on the show, don't be surprised. It's not a repeat. It's just there's a lot going on. Quickly, another question for you, Liv. Do you have any thoughts about the bill to give free lunches to all school children, regardless of income?
Well, this is such a bad idea. Okay, especially in the current context. The key emergency in front of us is not that kids are not being fed. It's that they're not being educated because they lost 2 years of their schooling due to the pandemic closing the schools. And what we should be spending our money on is getting these kids who are behind caught up. 62% of the kids in Washington State failed the state test in math. Okay, and all the researchers are saying this is a disaster. If we don't catch them up, we're going to have a generation of students that is going to depress our gross domestic product over the course of the next 20 years. It's going to cost the state of Washington $400 billion in lost income, and children are going to lose some great percentage of their earnings because their lifetime earnings because they did not get proper education. So giving money to feed every child in the school is going to take money away from helping students catch up in their learning, and the key purpose of the schools is to educate them, not to parent them, not to feed them, not to raise them, not to teach them morals. And here this is what this is an interesting question. Are we going to hand our children over to the state, let the state feed them, let the state decide what's good and bad, let the state decide what's going to do, the content of what they're going to be taught, or are parents going to have that control? So I think offering to feed every child in Washington State is a huge diversion from the mission of the schools. It's encroachment. Of course, everybody wants free handouts, but this is a bad bill and should not be promoted because it gives the message to families, to parents, that the state will take care and raise your children for you, and that is a bad. That's not going to help individual children grow and thrive and learn like we are supposed to be doing in schools.
Well, thank you, Liv. I appreciate that and appreciate you coming on the program. We'll probably see you next week for Washington Policy on the Go.
Okay.
And I should add that we had a comment, not a question, but a comment for you, just saying thank you for your work there on it in education. We know that there's a lot going on in Olympia on that. You can catch up on any of our research categories at washingtonpolicy.org. The blog is being updated every day, multiple times a day during the legislative session. And it's a great source for news in Olympia, and with the press corps diminished, it's tougher to keep track of what's actually happening in Olympia. So I think Washington Policy Center provides an essential service there on the blog, and I'd encourage you to check it out at least daily during the legislative session. We'll be back next Tuesday with another edition of Washington Policy on the Go. If you missed part of this broadcast, we do post this on our YouTube channel, and you can share that with friends or family who might have missed it as well. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll see you next week, next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liv. Right
Thank
here
you.
on Washington Policy on the Go for Washington Policy Center. I'm David Bowes, Communications and Marketing Director here, and thank you for listening.